All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So I have a little bit of housekeeping just to cover before we get too far ahead. As I said before, we're kind of crawling along a little bit. So I changed the format of the course quite a bit. Instead of doing a model view controller side to it, I've cut that out, and we're just doing the basic CRUD operations of a dynamic online website. So that's what we're working towards, and that's what we've been working towards, and we should definitely meet all the requirements for that. And in all honesty, that's basically what I did when I took web development at Georgian as well, was just basically that same idea. They did try to introduce the MVC as a component, but I just think it's a little too much to get to in this class. That being said, you're not going to miss out. I will post my resources for the MVC I have taught in the past. So you are welcome that if you're way ahead of this and you want to be able to advance further, you can look at those. I'll post them into the resources underneath our Blackboard shelf. What else was I going to say? Shit. Brain just stopped working. Oh, right. You are going to get MVC in your college course anyways. Next semester, I guess you guys have co-op next semester, but the following semester, you'll have ASP.NET and MVC, so you'll learn MVC there as well. So, and eventually you'll have the MERN stack, which is Mongo, Express, React, and Node, and that is also an MVC class, as well as learning a new pattern called component. So you'll learn all that as well. So you'll definitely get more than enough interaction with MVC. All right, quick little thing, because we are cutting out such a massive chunk, the project has been reduced and revalued. So the project will contain just the 3 parts. That's it, just 1, 2, 3, that's all. The due date has changed to December 8th. That is the absolute latest it can go to, because you guys are done as of the 13th, which means the marks have to be in by the 17th. So I have to have everything marked and ready to go, and seeing as how that's a fairly large project, and I have 3 classes, that's a lot of marking. So I got to make sure all that's done and ready to go by then. So there will be no extensions past the 8th. So each part has changed in its value. They are now worth 20% each. So part 1, part 2, part 3. The requirements have not changed. The requirements are the exact same. I'm not asking for any more. It's just the mark valuation is a little higher than it was before. Well, it's double, right? So it's a lot higher. So the whole project itself is worth 60% of the final mark. 10% comes from the quizzes, which you will get the 4th quiz next week, which will be an amalgamation of lesson 5, 6, and 7. So there'll be quite a few questions on it, and you'll have 2 weeks to complete it. And then every week after that, there should be a test. I'll make sure the quiz is there for you. So that'll make up another 10%. And then the last 30 will come on the final. So the final will be broken into 2 parts. You'll have a practical and a theory-based section. The theory-based section, basically, if you have done all the quizzes, you'll be fine. You'll have no issue whatsoever with the theory-based section. And the practical is an industry test, which means you can work in groups, you can work together to complete it. That being said, though, what I have noticed in the past is everybody's like, cool, I won't study, we'll be fine. My success rate for those industry practicals, which are open book, open internet, and you can work in groups, is about 60%, because people don't study, they don't practice, and they run out of time. They always run out of time, because you only get 2 hours to complete literally what we're doing over 14 weeks. So you need to practice, right? I will give you a base project. A lot of it will be filled out, and it will be the fundamental CRUD operations. So you'll create a resource, read a resource, update a resource, and delete a resource. And that's what you'll have to demonstrate. The way I do it is I can code it in 30 minutes. So if I can code it in 30 minutes, you sure can code it in 2 hours. That's the idea behind it. All right. As we get closer to that time period, I'll give you more information so you know exactly what to study for. But that's like 6 weeks away. So we're quite a ways away from there. Cool. Did you guys have a fun break? Yeah, you do anything fun? Yeah? Get into some trouble? Yeah, maybe a little bit. Do you remember your break, or was it that good? You just, no, nothing. All right. Any questions about the project? No? Okay, cool. Cool. Let's figure out where we were last week. I'm pretty sure we finished. Did we talk about super globals? I think we did, right? Quite in depth, actually. Okay, cool. So, and hopefully you remember them, right? The get and the post we use for transferring data from forms or from links to our server. And then sessions persist for the entire cycle of the browser, right? So pretty easy, but super important concept to understand, especially when we start logging users in and we start dealing with registration and stuff like that, because we need to be able to write that data somewhere and we need to get it from the front. Okay, cool. That's awesome. Why don't we go ahead and open up actually our applications. So we'll open up WAMP, because I think that's always a good starting point. WAMP. And then we'll click yes. Oh, weird. This projector has like a slight glitch in it, or the corner gets cut off. Neat. I'm going to click on the little W down here in the bottom corner where WAMP is, and I'm going to click on the www directory so that it opens up. The reason why I do that is because that gives me the directory that actually gets distributed by the Apache server, right? So this is the one that you can view in your browser. So I'm going to open up the COMP-1006 folder. There's our lessons. I'm going to open up my IDE. So there's my IDE. And I'm going to drag my lesson 4 directory onto my IDE and let go. And that will open the lesson 4 in your IDE. Or go file open and go to it if you want to do it that way. Either one works. Or if you have the path set up, you can actually, in Windows, right-click on the directory and choose to open in code if you have that set up. All right, so it looks like we finished off with create. So we were showing, so we did the flash data. The flash data was where we showed these little flash messages, which look like, let me find one here. I have a whole list of them. They look like this, right? So we did it so that we would have these 3 different flash messages. There's a whole bunch of them, and you can actually find other ones that you want to use. If you want to use the base styling from Bootstrap, you can go to getbootstrap.com, click on the documentation, click on components, and these are all the different alerts that you have available to you that you can actually spit out. This one we were kind of making fun of yesterday in class because it just seemed like absolutely unnecessary to have a white alert box, whatever. But yeah, and then it shows you the code to produce those boxes. So what you can do with your flash, right? So you might remember this from 2 weeks ago nearly. We want to send back this flash structure, right? We want to create this flash structure. And you'll see that it says success here, right? Well, that success, it shouldn't say error, it should say danger. So success and danger come from these, the class alerts. So primary, secondary, success, danger, warning, info, light, and dark. So if you add those as your keys in your flash object, then they will automatically assume these colors for you. So it's kind of handy, right? Might as well use the built-in notification system that Bootstrap gives us, at least the styling for it. So we also built a little partial to display our flash messages. And this is a little complex. It's 2 for eaches, right? So they're nested into each other. But that has to do with the fact that the object that we're iterating through is basically 2 nested arrays, right? So the first one is an associative array where we have these keys, error and success, and then the second array is the actual individual messages that goes under each of the notification types. So kind of easy. Cool. Then we got into talking about passing back form data, and that's where when the user makes a mistake, we take the form data that they submitted and we resubmit it back to their form and then repopulate their form, which makes sense, right? Because I showed you that big Pine Ridge ridiculous form that I created at my old job. this monstrosity. So when you get hit with forms like this, I'll choose cat this time. When you get hit with forms like this, it's really frustrating as a user if you make a mistake on this form and then get sent back and all the options that you've chosen are gone and you have to refill out the form. That is a terrible user experience. So in order to stop that, what we do is we give the ability to pass back the form data. So when we hit an error, we immediately send back any form data we collected, which is really just taking the post, that post super global, and assigning it off to a session key. And then it's available wherever we want to use it. And then in our header, because we don't want to keep the form data for the whole life cycle, we assign it off to a variable called form data, and then we unset the key, right? And then now we have form data within this current request, and we can just use it wherever we're going to use it, which is likely in the form here, right? And then in order to populate the values themselves, all we had to do is define the value attribute and then type in a little bit of PHP here, which would either select the form data key, and if it didn't exist, it would just populate it with null. So it'd either be full or not, right? Right now, not super handy. Yes, it's a nice user experience when we send back the user data, but what you're going to find is this kind of does double duty, because when we build the edit, right, we are going to purposely send back a user and send back its information. And so having that already in here will help us out because it will auto-populate that user's information into those fields, and then you can change that field and then hit update and update that user. So it does double duty. So not only is it, you know, a good user experience if the user makes a mistake because we repopulate the form, but it also ensures that we can edit the user, right? Cool. And then I think after all of that, we finally hit create, but then we talked about, did we talk about validation, sanitization, and normalization? No? Okay. So then we should definitely talk about that. Cool. So we ended at the point where we have a form, right? We have a flash message system in place for notifications. So if we have any errors or any successes, we can communicate back with the user, hey, this is what happened. This is where you went wrong. This is what you need to do to fix it. Or, awesome, okie dokie, you did a good thing, right? So that's cool. We've got that in place. We've got the form data in place as well, so we can repopulate the form if they've made a mistake. However, we need to do something with their data, right, to actually, before we even send out a flash message in the first place. We need to take the data that they submit to us, to our server, and we need to validate it, sanitize it, and normalize it. And each of these are different steps, and they're very, very important, not just for the user to have a good experience in your website, but more for your own protection, right? So this starts to deal more with the security of your server, because through forms create like a portal between some rando that's filling out your form and your very protected, expensive server, right? You don't want this random person to insert JavaScript and start stealing other users' details, insert SQL and start pulling information from your database, implementing man-in-the-middle attacks, implementing other types of SQL injection, or any other type of hackery that they want to do, all through your very vulnerable form, right? So in order to protect yourself, you need to follow those three rules: validate, sanitize, and normalize. And you will have a fairly secure app, not 100%. No app is 100%, but it'll be fairly secure. So what is the difference between these? Well, validation is more about ensuring that the data that they've given you is what you want it to be. It's what you're expecting it to be, right? So if you're asking for an email address and they give you the number 4, then obviously that's not valid data, right? You don't want to try to just submit 4 as an email address. You want an email address. Email address has to have a symbol, has to have the @ symbol, has to have a domain name, and it has to have an extension. Without those 4 parts, it's not a valid email address. So you would validate that it's an email, And if it isn't, then you would return back to the user with a flash notification saying, your email address is not in a valid format. Please correct this, right? Things like strings as well. So if you're expecting a first name and a last name, and the person is Madonna, and she types out her name as Madonna and doesn't give you a last name, maybe you don't accept that. Maybe you have to have a last name. So she's got to go dig up her birth certificate and find what her last name was before she changed it. So things like that as well. You're basically validating that the data they're submitting to you is what you're expecting, right? Another thing that you need to think about, that we will have to think about, is also whether or not two fields match, whether a field is unique, whether a field has the correct data in it. There's a few different things that you need to validate. So we're going to go through those steps. So below here talks a little bit more in depth about the different types of validation we do. The most common one, the one you'll do right off the bat, is whether a field is empty or not. So on the front end, you can add the required attribute to your forms. Did you guys do that when you built forms in HTML? Did you add the required attribute so that when you submit the form, it would come up and Google would be like, no, this field needs to have data, right? So a lot of people think that's enough. Like, a lot of people are like, cool, I've got validation, I'm secure. The problem is it's JavaScript that drives that little validation, and JavaScript can be turned off. And so that means any validation that the browser is giving, the second they turn off validation, it's gone, it's done. There's no more validation. And now whatever data they submit immediately goes directly into the database. Even if you were to find some way, like what you could do, what some people will do, is they check for JavaScript. And if JavaScript is turned off, then they won't allow the form to submit, right? Because the form will just disappear. So you need JavaScript in order to submit the form. Okay, so that's cheeky. You might be smarter, and you might have this form that now only exists if JavaScript exists. However, they can still get by that. What they can do is they can look at the fields that your form is requiring. They can look at the action that your form is sending the data to, and then they can get out of the browser altogether, open up an application called Postman, or open up a terminal and use something called curl, and they can curl a post request without using the form whatsoever, and send that data directly as a post request directly to your server. So they can find ways to thwart your form. Your form is not a protection point. Your server needs to be the protection point. That's the thing you control, right? So when they send that data to your server, it's now your responsibility to make sure that you're getting valid data. So obviously, if you're expecting a first name, a last name, an email address, and a password confirmation field, then you're going to check to make sure none of those fields are empty. So that's what this code does, is it goes through and it basically checks these fields. It wanders through and it checks to see if they're empty. So PHP nicely gives us this field called, or a function called empty. Empty is awesome because it will actually tell you if there's no value in the field that you're looking at, right? If it's a string, you could also do not equals blank string if you wanted to. That's also an option, but the empty function does a bit more than just look at blank strings. It will also tell if the value is null or undefined, or if it's an empty array. So it gives you a lot more functionality. So the other thing we need to look at is that once we find empty fields, we should record which fields are actually missing information. And you'll notice that we have this variable called proper here. And what it is it's basically taking the field name, right? So here we have a field with an underscore character in here. And what I've done is I've removed the underscore and replaced it with a space, which basically turns this into something that's more human readable, right? So if you send back an error message to the user saying, hey, the field password underscore confirmation is required, I realize it's, common sense should tell you which field you need to fill out, but sometimes common sense doesn't prevail, and that might confuse people. So it's better to make it as human readable as possible, right? So we can do that. We can still use this password underscore confirmation. What we'll do is just strip out the underscore and replace it with a space so it looks human readable, right? So once we're done and we figured out the errors, the next thing we want to do is check to see if we have any errors, because we should have error handling logic. Error handling logic is basically code you're going to execute if any errors exist. So we count the number of errors because we're just popping them into an array. We count the number of errors, and if there's more than 0 errors, then we'll execute some code in here that will allow us to be able to tell the user that they have some errors. So our code will look different than this very simple example. Our code will basically redirect back to the form and tell the user that these fields are missing and they need to fill them out. So empty, very, very common. Another one is matching. This isn't as common. Matching is generally used for, like, I would say not even that long ago, like maybe 5 years ago, a lot of websites you would go to sign up would get you to not just type in your email once, but twice. You'd have to type in your email and then the email confirmation just to verify that you've typed your email in correctly, right? And then they would have a password and a password confirmation field to make sure that your password was typed in correctly. Both of those are starting to disappear, right? So email confirmation is not as common anymore. Email confirmation is gone. And that kind of makes sense. Like, you can visually see the email you typed. Make sure you look at it before you hit submit to make sure it's the correct email, right? Easy peasy. Passwords, though, some sites, like, there's kind of two general ideas out there. Some people believe that the password confirmation thing is boring and old and we don't need to do that anymore. Now we only need one field that takes in the user's password and that's it, and we'll submit it, because at the end of the day, if they goofed up, they can always click password reset and go ahead and change their password, right? I kind of like the password confirmation because sending a user back through the password reset process is not very friendly. That is not a good user experience when you just signed up to a website. That is a bad user experience. If you're somebody like Amazon, where you have some heavy weight and it's like it or lump it, then yeah, you can do that. But when you're Sean McKinnon and you have 25 users a month, I'm going to do password confirmation. I don't want to make anybody mad, right? All right, so matching, empty, right? Do things match? Are things empty? Unique is very important, but will likely involve your data. So either whether you're storing in a database, a flat file, however you're storing your data, unique will definitely involve that. What the purpose of unique is, most times it's for like registration. Most times it's when you're registering something, right? I want to ensure that my users are unique. I don't want two emails that are the exact same in my system, right? So what I'll do is I'll check the emails that exist already with the email that the user is providing that they want to register. And if that email already exists in the system, then I'll turn back a response that says this user already exists, right? However, just to note, that is a double-edged sword, because yes, you're giving the user good information by saying, hey, this email already exists, right? So you need to choose something else. However, it also gives a hacker some information by saying, hey, that email doesn't exist, try another one, right? So they just keep iterating through emails and their big vulnerable dictionary and try email after email to see if they can find out which ones exist in your system, right? So it's a double-edged sword, but we do have ways around that. We can count the number of times an IP address, so whatever IP the user has when they're trying to attempt to access a site, we can count the number of times they attempt to access the site, and we can reject them after a certain number of tries. We can just blacklist their IP address, and then they can't access after that. So there are ways around it. Plus, there's a lot of libraries out there that protect you against that type of attack, which is known as a brute force attack. The next step is format. Format is very important as well. We're not actually really going to deal with format. Well, a little bit. We're going to validate that the email is in the correct format, right? That's an important validation for us. But what you will see quite often is things like password types, right? So what we might do is validate the password and say, this is where you go into a website, you type in your password, and it says, no, that's really weak. You need a stronger password, right? So what does that is basically this type of check. It looks for, in this particular pattern, it's looking for at least one capital letter within your password. So you have to have at least one capital letter. Then it looks and says, no, you also need one number. So at least one capital letter and one number in your password. And then the third check is looking for a symbol. So you need at least one capital letter, one number, and one symbol. And the password has to be at least 8 characters long. So that's a pretty strict password. But what you're doing in this scenario is you're not just protecting the user, right? Because you don't want the user to get hacked and people to take advantage of their account by just guessing their password and email combination. You're also kind of protecting your own data set, right? So you don't want hackers to go through a vulnerable account and now they're in the system and they can learn more about the protected system, right? So you want to try to avoid that. Not necessarily a huge thing when you're Netflix or Amazon or anything like that, but definitely a huge thing if you just built a small little website with a content management system for a client and somebody guesses their password email and then starts putting Viagra ads on their website because now they can easily access the content management system, right? So those are things you want to try to avoid. Incidentally, WordPress, one of the most common platforms that many people like to develop in because it's fairly easy, especially brand new, fresh PHP developers like to leave and go develop in WordPress because it is very easy. WordPress is very vulnerable to attacks. It is one of the largest platforms in the world, makes up over 30% of the internet right now. Incidentally, the internet is powered by more than 80% of PHP-based sites, which is crazy. That's so many. And 30% of the internet is WordPress. That's ridiculous. That's a huge number. Why? Because it's cheap. It can be next to free if you want it to be. And every mommy blogger on the planet wants a WordPress site because they can get these really nice looking themes and they're really pretty and they look awesome and it takes not even an hour to set up and get running, right? But the problem is a lot of these themes are very vulnerable to these attacks. Brute force attacks, cross-site scripting issues, and SQL injections. So you have to be cautious of those. Cool. So the good news is there are a bunch of built-in PHP helpers. So we have the empty function that we can run to check if something is empty. If we want to do a match check, we just use a conditional operator, equals, 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 right? That's all we need to do, or not equals, equals if we want. However, when we want to validate like a data type, for example, or if we want to validate an email or a URL or an IP address, PHP gives us a very easy way to do that by adding these filter validators. So we use the function called filter var, and then we give it the data that we want to check, and then we validate whether or not it is this certain thing. So we can validate, for example, this is a Boolean. Obviously it isn't. Oops is not a Boolean, so it would return back false. We can check to see if that is an integer. Unfortunately, it is not, so it will return back false. And we can check to see if that is float. It's not, it's a string, so it will return back false. Now, one thing to note, and I tested this because I was like, you have integer and you have float. So I want to see if you can validate that this, if I put the number 2 in here, right, that it is not a float, that it's an integer, because I didn't put 2.0, right? However, if you put the number 2 in there, sorry folks, still a float. So it will validate as true, so just be aware of that. And then validating formats. These validating formats, for example, that this is an email address. If this is missing the @ symbol, which it is, you notice they put a dot in here instead of an @ symbol, it will actually come back and as false, and then you can give an error message. This one, for example, is validating that this is an email address, or sorry, a website address. This will actually validate as false because you're missing the schema, which is HTTP or HTTPS. It has to be the full URL. Yeah. Cool. A little bit more. So sanitizing. So validating is validating that the format is correct, the data is there, things match, and things that need to be unique are unique. That's what validation is. Sanitization is a little bit different. Sanitization is directly manipulating the data so that you remove potential hacks. So what sanitization you're attempting to do is strip out characters that could cause SQL injections, strip out characters that could cause that could cause cross-site scripting, stuff like that. Here's an interesting concept. I never really understood what cross-site scripting was until I taught this PHP class 3 years ago for the first time, and then once I learned, I hacked everybody's website. Every single person, I hacked their site. And it was really easy. It was so easy. What you do, they give you a form, right? So let's talk about a comment box. So you build a blog, and you have a comment block at the bottom of your form, right? And so users can add comments to your article. And then the next time they come back to the site, they can see their comment at the bottom, but so can other users, right? Everybody can see the comments on a blog. But what if I don't put a comment in there? What if I instead put JavaScript in there? So I type raw JavaScript in there. So I type in script, I type in a fetch statement, and I fetch the data, like their document.cookies. So I grab all their cookies from the site that they're currently on, and I decide to fire those off as an AJAX request to my database. So now I post that as my comment. Two things happen, really cool things happen. One, script tags don't show up rendered in the browser because they disappear, they hide in the background because that's valid HTML. So what happens is my script tag is now running in the background on their website. And I'm taking every single user that goes to that page, to that article, and my comment loads, I'm taking their cookies from that site and delivering it off to mine. Gets worse. If they have implemented something like Facebook login, Google login, any of those type, or GitHub login, right? Any of those authentication factors, incidentally, what happens is the cookies from those websites now become available on your mommy blog. Now I'm grabbing your GitHub authentication cookies, I'm grabbing your Facebook cookies, and I'm grabbing any other cookies you might have access to because you use Facebook authentication on that site. And I'm firing all that crap off to my website to a database and storing all your information. That's why forms can kind of suck because people can dump crappy JavaScript directly into the form and the browser won't render it, right? It just sits there in the background. So how do we get past that? Sanitization, super important step. Sanitization will go through and it takes all those wonderful little script tags and it makes them literal. It takes characters like, for example, we have a script, right? So that's a script tag. That's for JavaScript. And it converts it to, oh man, do I ever hate writing these symbols? It converts it to try it again. I don't know why it's so hard to write that. Converts it to that, which is basically meaningless, absolute nonsense, has no validation whatsoever. And then when you load up your comment, what will actually render in the page is this as literal text, which means the JavaScript doesn't execute, right? And it also allows you, as the owner of the website, to quickly see that people are trying to be jerks and trying to put JavaScript on your website, right? So you can find that out quickly. PHP, thank God you don't have to figure this out yourself. You don't have to build regex to go through. You used to have to. You don't have to build regular expressions to go through and find this stuff and change them over. PHP actually gives you a way to do that quite easily. So along with the filter validators, there's also filter sanitizers. Same function, just a different type of filter we're going to give it. So for email, for example, we can run the filter sanitize email. That'll go through, rip out any any script tags that are in there, any common commands, any funny characters that shouldn't be in there that doesn't make up a valid email. So we'll strip those out. If you do it on a string, it's basically the same thing as the email. It'll go through and strip out scripts. It'll strip out tags or anything like that. It's not just tags like script tags. It also strips out any HTML tags and any VB script, because your browser can actually execute VB script, which is Visual Basic Script. And then sanitize int, basically if it's not a number, it gets converted to a number, which it will just literally convert it to nan if it's a string, right? So nan is not a number, which incidentally is technically a number, which is super weird, but it is. But yeah, so it will just convert it to whatever integer it thinks it should be. So sanitization, very important step. So we're validating, ensuring the data that we get is correct in the format we want, is there, is unique, is matchable, right? Sanitization, go away hackers. We're ripping out your scripts. We're not going to allow any of that crap in there. One other piece to sanitization is our SQL, right? That's why we use bind params. Bind params is another sanitization step. It's basically us taking in their data and forcibly converting it to data types and not allowing us to run their data raw into our MySQL, right? Normalization. This is kind of an interesting step. Normalization is more for you. It's more about keeping the purity of your data, the quality of your data. That's a super important thing to consider. So this is a super basic concept here. For example, a lot of older people like to basically press the caps lock key and leave it on for the lifespan of their computer. So they'll own their computer for 25 years because they paid $300 and damn it, it should last 25 years. They'll turn that caps lock key on and it will not go off. And every email they send will sound like they're yelling, right? Which is pretty much how they talk anyways. So anyways, they submit to our database their name in full capital letters, great big bold letters. But the thing is I want to keep my data pure. And we know as programmers that Sean McKinnon written in capital letters is not the same value as Sean McKinnon written that way. And it's not the same value as Sean McKinnon written that way. Those are different values to computers because computers are super literal, right? And a capital S and a lowercase s are not the same thing. They do not mean the same thing to a computer, right? Minus machine learning. So what we can do, though, is when the person enters in their name in full capital letters, we can actually take that name and convert it. We can make it so that only the first character is capitalized and all the rest of the letters are lowercase. However, we have to be careful because my name written like that, which is the way I write it, you'll notice I have a capital K and a capital M, right? So in Scotland, this means son of. And then this last bit here, if I can click, is the family name, Innan, right? So it's actually kind of important, not to me, who's like 200th generation Scottish, but it's kind of important to some people that those characters stay that way, right? Especially some cultures are very, I have two last names or I have this character in front of it like O'Hannigan or something like that, right? So you need to make sure you respect that. Unfortunately, this algorithm that I built down here will not respect that. Notice it takes my K and lowercases it. So you kind of have to figure it out whether or not you want to accommodate for that. I can tell you for a fact that Amazon does not. Amazon converts my name to this one. They just change it right out to that one. So if you type it in capitals, it doesn't matter. It goes lowercase, everything after that character. But yeah. So normalizing names, not necessarily the biggest thing you're going to normalize. Things you're going to normalize are address information, right? You're going to want to keep your address information nicely broken apart, especially if you're allowing the user to just type in the street address with the number. You may want to take that number out and convert it and then put everything in place. You may want to normalize data in your system. Say the user is adding tags or categories and you're using those categories with other users as well. You may want to normalize that data so it's the same for other users, that type of thing. Normalization is not likely the largest thing you're going to need to do, but it is definitely a business case that you need to consider when you're building out your application. The two most important, though, are sanitization and validation. Hands down, the most important steps you need to do. Normalization is more for user experience and your own personal sanity. Really is what it's about. Any questions about those three? Because we're going to code a whole bunch. Do you have a question? Normalization. Yeah. And that is a good point. we actually just had that issue recently with our. So we got acquired. We were called G Shift, and we built platforms for marketing companies. And then we got acquired by a company in Vancouver this year called Mint10. So we're trying to work together with this Vancouver team, and we both have different code bases written in two completely different languages. They work in Python, we work in Ruby. So there's a lot of like ways to try to get it so that our platform is usable within their system. So we have an API, right, which is the easiest way to deal with stuff like that. You build an API, which is like this middleman, and then they just call it, and then we give the data, and then it sends the data to them. Makes things nice and easy. The problem is that there's certain things that we're starting to find because our code base is 10 years old, and it's been written by, I think we counted the other day, it was like 32 different programmers have been in our system and made like huge changes, like massive changes. And some of them have been conscious of things like stripping out trailing spaces and leading spaces. And some of them, like the guy who wrote the API for Mint10, didn't think about those things. And so what would happen is they would write code and accidentally have a trailing space and send it to us. We'd have one system that would take the thing that they're adding, the value they're adding, and stick it in the database with the trailing space. And then we had another system that would strip trailing spaces and then try to compare it and tell them, nope, that doesn't exist. And they'd be like, yes, it does. We just put it in there. Nope, no, you didn't. It's not there. We don't see it. They're like, yes, we did. So stuff like that, yeah, definitely that's where normalizing data comes into more of an important step, is making sure things like that, trailing spaces, leading tab characters, new line characters, stuff like that, it's usually not a bad idea to strip that stuff out. Sanitizing strings, however, incidentally, this function will strip leading spaces and trailing spaces out for you, like immediately strips them out. So just be conscious of that, because I can't think of a time where you'd want a trailing space, but just be conscious of that. Yeah. Cool. So now that we understand kind of that stuff, we're going to go through and actually implement that into our system. So we're going to write our create script, but I think we're at 7:44. This script takes about an hour to write because there's a little bit of talking while we're building it out. So what we'll do is we'll take a 15-minute break, regroup at 8 o'clock, and then we'll just go full tilt and write out this entire script. All right? And then we'll take another small break, and then we'll do our login form, which took yesterday maybe 30 minutes to write. So, yeah, cool. And then we should be caught up and finally ready to log in as a user. Yay, yes. All right, let's take 15. All right, I guess I'll start back again. There's a few people missing. I'll just wait till they come back so we actually get into the code base. But I mean, there's some stuff that we can still actually kind of cover while I'm just waiting for them to come back. All right. So there was one thing I wanted to actually discuss with you about the project too. That's kind of important. I get a lot of these questions all the time. There we go. All right, so one of the things that everybody keeps asking me about is this parent-child resource. And I love it that you guys are like really trying to get your project done, but I don't expect you to know what the parent-child resource is yet because you haven't done that yet. Now, you might have done, so I was talking to Monday's class, and they said that in your SQL class, you guys started working with foreign keys. Have you guys worked with foreign keys in your SQL class? Okay. And those who had Anju, I'm not sure how Ben's doing it, but those who had Anju, I guess you guys had an employees table, right? And under your employees table, you obviously have an ID column for that employee, but then you had another ID that led back to a manager. What did you call that? Was it just employee underscore ID? Do you remember? Are you guys building employees? Okay. Was the other field, the foreign key field, called employee underscore ID, or what did she call it? Do you remember? No idea. Do you have it actually on your computer? Can I just look? So I can probably tell in about 2 seconds. Look at all your nice notification messages. Takes a second to load, eh? Workbench is super buggy as well. Oh, do you have it open? All right. Employee number probably. Yeah, it's employee number. All right. It looks like. Oh, wait. Sorry. Let me say that again. Employee name, employee number. Where's the foreign key? So the foreign key is employee number. How is she figuring out who the? Oh, manager number. That's what it is. All right. We'll write it like Andrew. This is definitely not the same way that I build my databases, but that's totally fine. So you have employees, right? That's your table. You have employee number, and you have manager number. All right. So the idea of parent-child relationship. Manager is the parent, right? So you have a manager, right? So we'll call him M. And the manager can have many children, many E's, right? So the employee would be the child. Now, while I don't mind this particular setup, I find when learning foreign key relationships, this is a very complex way to learn it when you're starting to reference back within a table. This is very complex. It's actually, to me, much easier to reference to another table that's completely a different table. So employee manager is definitely one concept. Another one that I like to use is authors who can have many books. That's another parent-child relationship. So that's what you're thinking about. You're thinking about some sort of like category that relates to a whole bunch of resources, right? So think about a grocery store, for example. You have vegetables, right? And vegetables, there's a whole bunch of different types of vegetables. There's root vegetables, right? There are leafy vegetables like lettuces and stuff like that. So it reaches out and branches out into subcategories. But you can get even more complex. You can have grocery store at the top, right? Because you might have multiple grocery stores in a city. That grocery store has departments. So the departments would be the children of the grocery store. Each of those departments has products, right? So those products would now become children of departments, and each of those products would have individual products, right? So you can break it out pretty huge. But that whole idea is what I mean by parent-child relationship. That's what I'm talking about. We're going to do a parent-child relationship in class. So if you are unclear, then just wait, because it's going to be not next week, but the following week anyways. So we will definitely be covering that. So that's what I mean. The one thing I will say too is it says here, ability to upload a file image. That is optional, and I will correct it, but that is optional. So if you want to do that, you can. It will be for bonus points, obviously bonus marks. If you don't get to it, that's totally fine. I understand, because we're not likely going to get to it in class. Unfortunately. It's totally not that complicated in PHP to upload, so it really kind of sucks, but I doubt we'll get there. So that will be for bonus marks. The other thing too is it says implement the user general CRUD. So it says registered user, I'm actually looking for any of the users to be able to do CRUD. So you can either use the general role user, which is like any user who logs in, right? Or the administrator. I don't care which one does the CRUD. That's totally fine. I had a student who's building a hotel reservation system, and she wasn't sure how to make it so that a user can do something in her system. So what we came up with is she's going to make it so that the administrator can create rooms and then the user can book the room, right? So she split it up. That way rooms and reservations have a parent-child relationship, and the CRUD system can be done by the administrator and the user. But there are some people who are going to come up with things that, maybe they're building a content management system and only the administrator can actually do anything with that. You do need to have role authentication, but you're taking that from when we're finished in the class anyway. So you'll be using the system that I build with you, unless you want to build your own, that's totally fine. But you can use the system we build together to actually implement role authentication. All right. I wanted to wait, but I don't want to wait forever. So I think we're going to move on. Cool. So our create script, let's make sure you have your code open in your IDE, right? And we're going to open up our users create.php page, which looks like this right now. And I'm going to run out of room if I leave it at that size. So I'm going to have to come down. So if you have difficulty seeing that, please move up. All right, so this is the code we wrote last week that basically it spits out some information to the browser for us so that we can easily see our error messages and stuff like that. It was just test code. If you want to keep this code, then comment it out. Otherwise, we don't need it. We're going to get rid of it because we're going to write that same structure so many times it's not even funny in this file. So I'm just going to get rid of it because I don't need it. So right now, all I have is the config file, which is our normalized paths, and I have our connection script. Now, one other piece we will need under our connection script is the actual connection. And I'm pretty sure we rewrote our connection scripts. We wrote a function around it. I'm just going to quickly check because I don't remember for sure. Yeah, we did. We wrote a function around it. So we need to actually create the connection, which is just going to be $con equals connect. And there we go. And that's the connect function we wrote 2 weeks ago. Now, step 3 says create a message system. Well, that sounds a lot more sophisticated than it is. We already created the flash notification system that's going to handle with actually showing the user those messages. Our next step is to actually be able to take messages that we want and put them into our session. So that's really what we're building here. And it's going to have 3 steps. Step 1 is to actually open the session so that we can use it. So we're going to say if session _ start. So that's the opener. Or sorry, status, not start, status. There we go. We're going to check to see if it's already open before we attempt to open it. And we're going to check against one of the variables that PHP creates, which is PHP session none. And if the session isn't started, then we need to start it. So we check the status of the session. If it's PHP session none, then we go ahead and start our session, right? And we're doing this because we want to use session variables to have persisted data between requests, especially when we log in our users. Definitely going to need it done for sure. All right, so I've got my started session. Now I'm going to create my message system, which is really just a session variable with a key called slash that I'm going to make equal to an empty array. Then I'm going to create a variable, make it equal, called errors, and make it equal to an empty array. And the reason I'm doing that is as I go through my validation steps, I'm going to take any errors I find and I'm going to jam them into that array. And then at some point, I'm going to check to see if there are any errors. And if they are, then I'm going to add those errors to the session flash. And I'm going to send all that back to the user by redirecting them back to the form page. That's our goal. All right. So I've got my session, I've got my message system, as I've called it, which really isn't that sophisticated. My next step is to actually check and see if I have any validations that need to be done. So the one thing I know right off the bat, all the fields in our form need to be required. They have to have a first name, they have to have a last name, they have to have an email address, otherwise there's no way for them to sign in. They have to have a password, and I want them to have the password confirmation field so that I know for sure the password they typed was correct. So my first check is to see whether or not any of the fields they submitted were empty. All the fields from the form get passed to us by the HTTP method that the user chose. Or sorry, not the user, that we chose when we built the form. Had we not given it a method, it would have used get. Instead, it used post because we chose the post method. So it created a super global called post, and then it added all of the field names into that super global. So first underscore name, last underscore name, email, password, and password underscore confirmation as keys. And then it gave them the values, and the values were the data that the user passed through the form. Okay, that's basically what we got, which is what we saw when we first booted up our page today, right? That's the post that was spit out. So we're going to take that information, we're going to iterate through it, and we're going to check to see if any of them are empty. Now, the cool thing is that we really want to see whether any of those fields are empty, and we can do that by just iterating through the post array, because it's already an array. We can iterate through it and just basically check each of the values to see if there is a value. So that code is going to look like this. Under step 2, these steps are not in order. I literally have 4 step 3s. What was I drinking? All right, we're going to iterate. So we're going to do for each. We're going to create a for each loop. This is a structure that will iterate through an array, and it literally means that for each value in the array, do this code. That's literally what it means. So we're going to say for each value in the super global post as field, which basically says, hey, take that value and dump it into field for me. But we're going to go one step further. We're going to add the fat arrow and say $value. And what it will do instead is it will take the key from the associative array and assign it to $field. And it will take the value and assign it to value for us. So we get the key and the value. So if you remember our post object from our form, I really don't want to write on the blackboard right now. Our post object from our form comes back as an associative array that has all of the field names from our form as keys, and then all of the values the user submitted in the form as values. So each one of those names from each one of those fields is going to get passed into field, and then the value that the user passed will go into value. Our next step is to create somewhat of a formatted, well, actually, we're just going to check first. We're going to check and see if value is empty. Because if it's empty, then we got stuff to do. So if it is empty, If it is empty, bad user, I want to be super nice to you and give you a nice formatted string. And I'm going to do this in 2 steps. Step 1, I'm going to find the underscore character in the field name and replace it with a space. This is a space in here. Okay, so it's going to look in field, it's going to look for the underscore character, and it's going to replace it with a space. This is one of the PHP functions that annoys the crap out of me. To me, if I was to build this function, field would be first, then the thing you're looking for, then the thing you want to replace with. That makes the most amount of sense to me in order. But for some reason, it's written backwards. All right, next, we're going to go formatted again, and we're going to overwrite the value in formatted, this time by doing UC word, which will literally uppercase the letter of each word. And I'm going to give it $formatted from the above statement. So the first time formatted passes through, it's going to replace any underscores with spaces. And then the next time I pass in formatted, it's going to uppercase each word. And then we'll get a nice formatted string for the user. Then we're going to add an error. And we'll do this in 2 ways. First, I'll show you how to push a new value onto an array. And I asked my Monday class, I said, have you seen this before? Have you seen that in Java? Like, does Java give you a way to push a new value to a list? And they all told me no. And they're all liars. It's not true. There is a way to push values onto a list, but I don't think you use a list. I think you use a different structure. But it basically works kind of the same way as PHP's associative arrays. It's kind of the same idea. Maybe it's a dictionary. Right. So it'd be an array list then, yeah. That's kind of the same way as it is in C++. C++ works like that. If you want an array that you can constantly assign new values to and just push on, you have to use something called a vector. And it's really goofy because what it actually does is every time you add a new value, it takes all the contents of the old one, copies them over to a new memory address location, and then destroys the old one. It's the slowest freaking process in the world, but that's how they do it. All right, so array push. This takes the array you want to push to. See, this time it makes sense. It's in the correct order. The array you want to push to, sorry, that is definitely not the array. That is the array. And then the thing you want to push on. So we're going to push on a string with double quotes. We're going to say, we'll use some string interpolation here. So we'll put our variable in here, formatted. Cannot be empty. So that is the long way to write it. If you want to write it in the shorthand method, I'll write both. Copy your string and just type in $errors with a set of square brackets, an equal sign, and then paste your string, and that means the same thing. These two things are the exact same thing. This one is the shorthand method. This is the long way to do it, but they mean the exact same thing. I like the shorthand method. I'm not a big fan of using a function to push onto an array because in JavaScript, you don't use that kind of call. Well, you kind of do, but not really. I like this way. This way looks cleaner. Incidentally, Ruby uses a bit shift operator to do it. All right, cool. So I'm iterating over all the fields in my post, all the keys and all the values. I'm checking to see if the value is empty. If the value is empty, I pass it into the string replace and replace the underscore character with a space. Then I uppercase each of the words if there are more than one word. It'll uppercase every word that's in the sentence or in the value. Then I pass it into the string interpolation and I push it into my errors array. I say, here, have another one. Cool. And it will do that 5 times. if I have 5 blank values, then it will push the error in 5 times, right? Which is good because it's a good idea to tell the user every single spot they made a mistake, right? Treat it like it's like being a mom, right? Shame them for the mistakes they made. All right, step 3, verify that the email is in the correct format. Wow, that's actually super simple for us to do. We're going to do an if condition, and in our if condition, we're going to use the filter var function, but we need to reverse what it returns. So filter var is going to say either true, the email is in the correct format, or false, it's in the incorrect format. However, I only want to push an error message on if I get back false. Conditional statements always have to be true in order for the block to execute. That's just a fact with any programming language. There is only one programming language I know of that you can reverse that. Instead of using an if, you can use an unless, and that's Ruby. It's the only one I've ever encountered. Otherwise, every single programming language on the freaking planet requires that whatever you put between these brackets is true in order to execute whatever in the braces. That's just a fact. So I want to add an error message, so I need to reverse my logic. So I'm going to put the not operator, right? So that's the exclamation mark. And I'm going to say, if this is not true, right? Which not true is literally true. If this is not true, and this takes 2 arguments. First, the value you want to check against, so email, and then one of the preset filter constants that PHP creates. And the good thing is your IDE should automatically populate a list for you so that you can check. Just select the one you're doing, which is validate email, and hit enter. So we're going to say, if the email is not, that's what that exclamation mark is, if the email is not a valid email, then $errors, square brackets, equals the email provided is not in a valid format. I always thought it'd be funny to like kind of torment the user a little bit when they enter in information and it's wrong. Be like, your email is not in the correct format, you should give up. Stuff like that. Go away. Things like, or just a random insult anytime they do something wrong. I thought that'd be pretty funny. All right, verify that the password and password confirmation match. Well, good news is no crazy functions. Very easy thing to check. You just use a logical set of operators to do the check, right? So you're going to say if $_post. Oh, I goofed. I'm sorry. This is not email. This is $_post. Square brackets, in quotes. There we go. That's where the value is. Sorry about that. Not email. All right. So here we're going to do password. I'm going to say if password, and again, I'm reversing my logic. I'm not checking to see if password is equal to password confirmation. I'm actually checking to see if it's not equal because I want to add an error if it's not equal, right? So not equal to $_ password post password confirmation. Don't type the words I just said. They don't make sense. I'll try sentences. Maybe that'll work for us. And then I'm going to do $errors, square brackets equals the password and password confirmation need to match. Now, like I was saying earlier, some people I think, well, for example, GitHub has abandoned the password confirmation when you sign up to GitHub. And I noticed this because I'm teaching an HTML class at my local library, which has turned into more like seniors learning HTML, which is kind of fun. But anyways, we're using GitHub because we're using an online code editor called Code Sandbox, and GitHub just makes it easier for them to sign in and register and everything. Anyways, long story short, we're going through and we're setting up our information, and the password field is just one. It's just one that says password, and there's no second one. But the way they get around putting in the password confirmation is they have a little kind of ghosted out eyeball on the right-hand side, and you click the eye, and then it will actually show you what you typed into the field. I feel like there needs to be kind of a blend. You have password confirmation, and the eye, right? If you click the I, password confirmation goes away, and you only need to fill out password. If you don't click the I, then you need to fill out both fields. That way it's guaranteed they can't make a mistake, right? All right, I'm going to scroll up a little bit. Is that okay? I don't want to lose anybody. All right, good? Okay, cool. So step 5, return to the form if there are errors. So basically, if any of those fields were empty, if email doesn't match, if email is not a valid format, and if the password doesn't match, then at this point, I'm going to return back. And the reason why I'm doing this is because as a developer, my developer brain says, don't waste resources on connecting to the database if the person has screwed up so bad that you can't do anything with it anyways, right? It makes more sense to send back an error message, let them fix their issues, and then when they send me valid data, then I'll connect to the database and continue on. We do have more validation to do after this step, but I don't want to do any of it until they fix their data, okay? So this is kind of like a whole block of stuff here. All right, it's written in 2 chunks here. So first we want to count the array, which basically just means we're going to do an if condition, and we're going to count errors and see if there are more than 0 errors. Because if there are, then we want to execute some logic. So basically, if everything is perfect, we shouldn't have a single error and everything should be golden, pony boy. If not, then we're going to have to perform some logic. Our logic, quite simple. We're going to access our session flash, and we're going to give it a new key called danger. Danger, Will Robinson. And we're going to make it equal to our errors array. So basically what we're doing is we're taking the list of error messages that we just wrote, and we're shoving it into danger. If you remember the way our flash notification system worked, it iterates over each of the data, each of the flash types, right? So danger, success, warning, info. And then the inside loop will iterate over each of the messages. Because of that, we have to make sure we give it an array. If we don't give it an array, it can't perform that iteration step. That's a good challenge for yourself. Figure out a way to make it so that you can either give it a single string or give it an array, and it will still work. That's a bit of a trick that you'd have to come up with. All right, so there we go. Flash errors. I'm also going to send back their form data so that it repopulates their form. And that's just a matter of assigning post to the session form data key. After that, I want to relocate. And this is kind of just a cheeky way to relocate. There isn't a better way in PHP to relocate. There's no way to take a user and build a new request and send them off somewhere. Instead, we have to use header, which kind of creates a new request on its own, and then we just provide the appropriate headers. The header we're going to provide, sorry, it should be in quotes, is location with a semicolon. It looks so hacky. I'm not a big fan of the base path, which is coming from our config file, users new.php. So we're going to send them right back to the form where they came from. There we go, redirect to the form. And then super, very super important. When we redirect, we must exit. And the reason why is because if we don't exit, the script will continue to parse, which means you've sent them back and said, all your stuff is wrong, but then you added all their crap into the database anyways because you still continued to parse the script, right? By exiting, script is done. We die. Actually, if you don't want to use exit, you can use die because that also works. I like exit. It's more descriptive, less angry sounding. So we can actually test our script at this point, right? Because we're just going to literally force it to throw an error anyways. So if you jump over to your browser, open up your form, type out your form details. Actually, don't type any form detail. Just click submit. And you should get back 5 errors. You should get back, 6 errors. You should get the first name and last name and email, password confirmation are all empty. You should get back that email is in the incorrect format because a blank string is in incorrect format. And that should be it. Password and password confirmation, even though they're empty, technically match. So that should be the only one that actually passes. All right? Anybody still typing this out? All right. I'm going to, kind of? Okay. I'll give you a second. Okay. I'm going to jump over to the browser here. I'm going to go to none of those. Let me open up my page. I don't know why it's not open already. Go lesson 4, register. All right, so I'm going to register for a new account. I'm just going to click submit. Is it this error that you're getting? Call to undefined function connect. Okay, so I'm getting call to undefined function connect, and I'm guessing, so that will be in our connect.php script. Oh, right. We're getting undefined function connect because we created an IFI. So some of you have a function called connect, and some of you have this code, which is an IFI. An IFI is a instantly invoked function execution, which is fine. It's totally fine if you have the IFI. That's totally okay. Just leave it. The thing is, though, is we don't need, if you have the IFI, you don't need this $con equals connect. If you don't have the IFI, and instead under your connect, you have a function called connect, then you need to keep this line in. That was dumb. Why did I do that? That just makes things so confusing. That's what I get for showing off. All right. So comment $connect if you have the IFI. Save your page. Jump back over to your browser. Hit refresh, and it will ask you to continue. Just click continue, and you should get the big list of errors. Sorry, the big list of validation fields that are wrong. All right. Who has errors? Just out of curiosity, show of hands. So about 3 of you? Okay. I will quickly look at your error and see if I can resolve it, and then we'll move on. Undefined variable called email on line 29, on line 39. Show me line 39. Yeah, so we changed it. You must have missed when we changed it. So it's actually shift POSP. And then we'll hold down shift and we'll highlight it. Square brackets and a quote character.
You missed the L.
Did I miss the L? No, square brackets and a quote character. There we go. Alt-Tab, Control-R, continue. Operator not supported for strings on line 40. I can't see for some reason. 40. It is. The problem is you need a space, and you need to have predefined errors. You did. Okay. I think it's the space when you put the equal sign buttered up against that like that. I think it goofs up. Square brackets for errors. What? $ errors equals email is not in the invalid format. Errors. Oh, this is why. Because you have converted it to a string. You have to keep doing this, otherwise it doesn't realize it's an array anymore. Alt Control R. Continue. And now it's redirecting to some crazy path because you've got something wrong. So you're redirecting to Bade path, which is not a thing. That is down here where we do the location. So it's actually, yeah, base path, like that. Back. And yeah, it's working. You're fine. All right. You have errors too? Does this have to do with the multiple MySQLs again? Yeah, it does. So we talked about this before, I think, where you have multiple MySQLs running at the same time, because you've got the one that Angela made you set up. Is it Angeli or is it Angela? Or Andrew? Andrew. Just Andrew. So it's none of those. That's what you're saying. Andrew. It's not you. She hates everybody. The heck? Maybe you're not running WAMP. Maybe I'm going way too far here. Oh, you are running WAMP, but you've got. I have trouble just getting to the system where I need to get to. It's orange because you have two running, and I can't get to the thing I need to get to because you're in Windows 7. How do I get to those? Big system Linux. It's not device manager. Set up recovery. What an annoying way to get through here. I don't even know how to get there. Activate Windows. Oh, that's so annoying. Are you just running another thing? Maybe that makes things easier. No, you just have Slack running. Son of a... I need to get to the correct MySQL, and I can't get to the correct MySQL because I can't access system settings. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to help you. It's not in here. There's a thing called system that allows you to actually access all of the current running processes and where they're enabled. Services. It's not system. It's services. Thank you. Sorry. That's why I'm having so much problem. Oh, what the hell is all that? View local services. Okay, maybe it's that. Yep, that's it. All right. MySQL. Yes, you are. So this MySQL 80 that is running right here, that is the one that Andrew got a whole bunch of people to install. And what's happening? What's happening is WAMP runs its own MySQL server, and then you've got that one running, and the two are like fighting it out. That one needs to die in a fire, but The problem is that you're the problem is that you're using it in Andrew's class. So all of your MySQL work is running on that process. So what you have to do is you go to the Windows icon, you type in services when you come to my class, right? You go find MySQL service, and you stop it. And then the next time you reboot your computer, it will restart. Okay? Then you come down here to WAMP, click on it, restart all services. I'll go red, orange, green. Green, green. Now you've got errors, at least, which is better than database errors. You've got almost the exact same error. Undefined variable post on line 43. So let's jump over to your editor, line 43. Because you did $ post and not underscore. You need the underscore. Looks like you did it everywhere else, though. Nope, I need the browser. Undefined, okay, you did the same thing that he did. Where we did email, but we did it differently. Wait, what?
I changed.
Yeah, you did change it.
Yeah.
Why is it still showing up, though? Oh, undefined index email. Okay, so what causes that is the form that you're sending over. PHP takes that form. It takes all of the fields from the form, and it looks at the name tag, right?
Okay.
Whatever you called the name is what it turns into indexes inside the array, inside the post array.
Okay.
So what that means is that in your form, it's not called email, it's called something else.
Okay.
So if we open up the form itself, so Control P, form, and we look at email in here, yep, you have it written weirdly. So I'm guessing that's blowing it up. Okay, so that's going to require us to actually repost. Some of these spaces actually do matter. I'm way too far. All right, we want new. Oh, right. Okay. You also have an undefined variable called session in your header, which is because you spelled session with lowercase s. Yeah, lowercase session. Oh, you've got it in a few places. All right, so this one, we need an underscore. Actually, we're going to do this. And it's underscore session. Take advantage of that pop-up. You see how it popped up and it tells you? Take advantage because that's exactly what you want. All right. Control R. There we go. Invalid arguments applied for the for each and the flash on line 7. If empty flash data as type and messages. So flash data must not be an array. I think it was just called flash, wasn't it? Or I guess it is flash data equals flash data or null. Okay, so that's probably because in the create script, you're not passing back an array. You're passing back something that is not an array somewhere. No, it looks correct. $sign errors equals formatted empty pack. Oh, it's probably because what we passed back last time is not an array. So we'll just hit submit. Cool. We got to the page, but we didn't go anywhere. So it looks like you're not hitting this errors block. So $sign underscore post, $sign underscore session errors. All of this should be executing fine. Yep. So we're hitting that line. That's good. That's good. That's fine. If count error is greater than 0, so you're definitely in there. Found it. Found it. You're not actually locating anywhere. You're relocating. Base path is a constant that we created in our config file. There you go. Control R, enter. Something is wrong with that thing. What the fuck? Flash. For each, flash data as type and messages. Messages as message. That looks all correct. Fine. All else fails, just var dump the whole damn thing out. $sign flash data. It's getting back true. Because you're checking if it is set. You're literally returning true. This will return true. And you did the session thing again. Yay! And then we want to fix the error that we had. So let's comment this guy out because it's going to keep coming up on you. There we go. We want to go back to the flash thing and get rid of this flash data. So let's take that right out. That can stay because it's just acting as a protector for us. Cool. You're good.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, let's see.
That's the same thing.
What do you mean you have the same thing? You don't know if you have the same thing.
Like, I just copied the code. Like, I went
You have
outside.
the same thing as in you might have errors. All right, there we go. All right, so you kind of had the same thing.
I just copied the code. Like, I just went outside.
Yeah, but you put this in quotes. And so this is a constant. See that config file we created? That's where that's coming from. So Control S, Alt Tab, Control R, resend. Boom, that's offensive. We're good. All right. So that you can comment out. That's in your header. I'll show you actually. To make it easier. It's just in your header file. It's right up. Oh, I thought it was. Maybe it's not. Oh, right there. Yeah. Just go. Boom. There you go. Oh yeah. Because you have it on a second line. What did you do? Why do you have it on so many lines? There we go. Okay. Awesome. Cool. You're good. All right. Did you get it working or no?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Does anybody else have errors? A whole bunch of you. All right.
When we submit, it's just redirecting to the same page, and we still have these messages.
Oh, okay. To get rid of those, if you go to your Visual Studio Code,
Yep.
open up the header file under partials header. There you go, and scroll up. It's that's showing. So if you go from line there, drag all the way up to there, and then to the next one. You need one more. Hold down Shift and press up.
Okay.
There you go. And now comment that out by hitting Control backspace. Yeah. There you go. Now those will go away.
And but like I'm
now
not
click
getting the
submit.
message.
Click submit. Yes, you are.
Okay.
You do the same thing. All right. Are you good? Yeah, you're good. Good? Good. There was another over here. Ladies, you're good? All right. You're getting it not found, so that's likely because when it redirects back, it's not redirecting to the correct page. All right. Nope. Okay. We're under connect, which is fine. We want to be under create. Wait, what are we in? I'm in the wrong one. Oh, you have every folder open. Cool. All right. Which one do I want?
004.
Okay. Where the hell's the create script gone? Oh. Yeah, good. Okay, so what your issue is literally that folder. It's the problem. You're navigating to lesson 004, which is fine. Users. I have a funny feeling this folder doesn't exist where you think it does. Oh, none of this exists. There it is. And lesson 4 is not in. Lesson 4 is right there. There you go. Register users new doesn't exist because it changes it back to that. So what's causing that? You have links, right? Each of these are links. Look what happens when I hover over it. Look where it points to. COMP_1006. But your directory is called COMP-1006. So because I don't want to do this right now, you're going to go through, find all your links that point to COMP touchscreen that go to COMP_1006 and change them so they're COMP-1006. Okay? And then that should fix your problem. Do you have an error?
Mine's fine. I'm just trying to.
I see errors.
Yeah. There's errors because I'm trying.
Okay. Yep.
And it doesn't match.
Doesn't match. So doesn't match means just put, oh, you shouldn't get doesn't match. That's, no. So that means that your expression evaluating the two of them is likely not equals equals, but instead equals equals. No, you've got not equals equals.
Yeah, not equals. Say that.
Yeah.
Go back, reload. No.
Password confirmation is required. Passwords must match. Let me check and make sure mine's not doing the same thing. That doesn't make sense because a blank value is, nope, mine does not do that. Let's see what's in your post. So do a var dump and var dump your post. Because if you var dump the post, then that will tell us. Yep. Oh, because we're redirecting. So turn off the redirect. So where it says header, yeah, just comment that out. There you go. So that's the reason why. So what's happening, you're not getting those errors because it's redirecting before we actually get to see those errors. It's almost like it's out of sync. Why would you be getting a password? Sorry, can you go back to that error? Undefined index password confirmation. So what that usually means, the post indexes are built by your form, right? So the name field on each one of your inputs in your form is where it gets those keys from. So I'm guessing that under your form, password underscore confirmation is not what it's called in the form. It's called something else.
I can double check that. Although the other theory I did have was that we added placeholders that are different.
Placeholders won't affect it, but value would.
Value. There's no value, just placeholder.
Then no, the placeholder won't affect it.
All right, let's see what there's.
So if you go to form, go to where it's password confirmation.
Password confirmation. All right, password confirmation.
There you go. That's exactly what. Save that. Go check it.
I hate those things.
That's the issue.
One we had was rather than saying just email is required or email is not valid, having one or the other, not both of them posting at the same time.
So to do that, you would have to basically check if there are any empty errors.
So we have to have an if statement of if or else.
Kind of. So easy. Yeah, you could do it as an if else. That would be quick. Or you would have a flag variable that you set.
All right.
So it's like empty errors, right? You would call it.
Yeah.
And then if you get an empty error, you set it.
Okay.
And then if it's set, then you don't show the other error.
Okay.
That kind of thing. Yeah. Which is probably easier just to leave it that way. Yeah. All right. Let's. What time are we at? 9:01. So I definitely want to get this script kind of completed. I will post this code as well. So if you are falling behind, not a big deal. I'll repost all of this code for this week, and then you guys can start from that point. But I recommend that you go over it. What I will say is a lot of you, I think, get discouraged when you get your errors. All of your errors so far are just syntactical. Like they're very like small things. Usually it's spelling errors or stuff like that. It's not anything huge. The good sign is that it's not logic errors. It's not like it's not like you don't understand things like not equals to or a loop or something like that. You definitely understand the logic. So that's good. That is always a really good sign. Syntax errors, I make syntax errors all day long. I type thousands of lines of code and I make syntax errors constantly. So it's not something you should ever feel, discouraged by. All right, cool. Which step are we on now? Oh yeah, no, oh cool. We're in a good step. We're in a database connection step. So let's just recap quickly what we've done. We checked to see if we had any empty values. We checked to see whether or not we had a valid email address. We checked to see if our passwords were identical. And then we sent back error messages to the user if everything kind of was not great, right? Nothing was hunky-dory. So our next step, it says ending of validation. Now it wants us to get into sanitization, but we have one more piece of validation that we're going to check. And that's, we're going to check to see if the email is unique. Oh, wait, no, sorry. We're going to do some sanitization first. And actually, that makes sense. The reason why we're sanitizing before we check whether the value is unique is because we don't want to accidentally run user raw unsanitized code that may contain malicious data directly against our SQL database. That is not a smart idea. So we'll sanitize the email address. And this is going to seem kind of interesting. Instead of creating a new variable, I'm going to use the post email variable that's already there, and I'm going to sanitize the value and store it right back inside of it. Might as well. So I'm going to say filter var $_ make sure you don't forget that underscore, post email, and we're going to filter sanitize the email. And what that will do is it will strip out any illegal characters, anything that might be malicious, and it will return back, and trailing spaces and preceding spaces, and it will return back a valid sanitized email address, which we will store right back into itself. Now, interestingly enough, if the user is a hacker, this kind of does double duty a little bit, because they'll give us some hacky statement, right, in the email address. We're going to sanitize it and clean it up, and we're going to register this user, because if that's the only thing that was wrong, we're going to have this nice sanitized user, and we're going to store them. And now the hacker won't know his email address to log in, because we just stripped out all the illegal characters. So he doesn't necessarily know what the wrong email address was, right? So, not to mention, we shouldn't have that issue anyways, because this should take care of it, right? The validation should show that it's not a correct one anyways. But just in case he hits this point, we will strip that out, and then he'll have a lot of difficulty logging in, because it won't be the same thing that he used before. All right, sanitize the other two fields. We're going to use a single line for each loop, which is a little interesting. Basically, any block statement that you write, you can actually write as a one-liner, providing you only have one line of executable code inside the block. So if the block is only going to contain one executable line, you can actually write it all in line. So we're going to write that as one line. We're going to say for each, the heck was I doing? I need the code. Oh, right. For each, we're going to put an array in here, and we're just going to put first name and last name, because they're the only two we actually care about, as $ field, and then we'll write our logic statement, which is $_post, $field inside of it, because we're using the variable to access the key, equals filter var $_post $field, and then the sanitization, which is for strings. There. Maybe I will write it on 2 lines, just because it's a little tricky to see on my screen. It's a little easier to see like that. So we're not going to sanitize the password. We kind of are, because when we bind our parameters, we'll bind them so that they get automatically cast anyway, so we don't have to worry about SQL injection. But we're not going to actually sanitize the password, because there's not a single place on our application that we would ever show the password or put the password into our HTML anyways. So we don't need to worry about that. Step 8 is going to be a little bit of a longer process, because we have to create some SQL. Essentially, what we want to do is validate whether or not the user email already exists in our database. So the only way we can do that is by going to the database and selecting it and seeing if it's there. If the email address exists, then we're going to write an error message sending it back to the user saying this user already exists, right? If they don't, then our next step is going to be essentially creating the user and writing them to the database. So I want to do that now. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And I'm just going to ask, does everybody have that written, or are you still writing? No? Okay, I'm going to keep scrolling. I'll copy this and post it into Slack as well, just so that you have it. All right, step 8. Users need to be unique, so check if the email already exists. All right, so basically everything I just said. So we are going to type the following statement. First, we're going to type out our SQL statement. So SQL equals select email from, so we're only selecting the basic ingredient that we need from users where email equals the bound parameter of email. Okay, so we're going to only select the email. What that select statement is doing is if it finds somebody and we do a fetch, we'll only receive the email column value back. That's it. We don't get any more. And only if they match the email address we're going to provide them. After that, we're going to create the statement, which will hold our prepared SQL statement. So $con prepare $SQL. So we're going to prepare our SQL. Then we're going to bind our parameter, but we only have one. So bind parameter will take our value and bind it to the parameter that we defined inside our SQL, which is this one right here. And the one thing I've noticed that a lot of people seem to have a problem with is that they like to put spaces in odd locations. Don't put a space here. Make sure it's just exactly as it's written here without the space. So it's just one word, okay? No spaces. No trailing spaces, no preceding spaces. $_ post email, which will be our sanitized email. And we're going to cast it, to a string, which means even if there was something illegal in there, it's going to get ripped out. The string sanitizer will also escape characters, just to warn you. So if there's any characters in there that shouldn't be in there and it's not sure what to do with them, it'll put an escape character in front of them. That's something to note, that when you do that and you go to pull your data out and you've written some, maybe you're building an editor, right? And you're building HTML and you want to intentionally put tags in there, you're going to want to make sure you skip your sanitize step. And you're going to have to come up with a better way to deal with sanitization in that scenario. I've had to do that before for an editor, and we basically we had to write great big regular expressions to go through and strip out JavaScript and stuff like that, and then just keep the HTML in. It was a real pain, but it was unfortunately what we had to do. And then we're ready to execute the statement. So this will fire it off to MySQL. Execute. And now we can actually fetch. And we don't really care about the user coming back. I don't care about any of that at all. All I care about is that whether or not the user actually exists. So I'm just going to create a variable called exists, and I'm going to make it equal to the fetch. So basically, if I get a record back, then exists will contain data. If fetch can't find anything, it actually returns back a Boolean of false. So I can use that to my advantage by writing this error statement. If $exists. So if there is this user already, then $errors, square brackets, equals this user already exists. And that's how we validate whether the user is already in the system or not. Now we're kind of at the point again where we need to do the same error check again. Because if the user already exists, we don't want to continue on with our statements. We want to just basically send off the error message and let them know that they need to fix it. So once again, we're going to do an if count of errors, right? Check to see if there's any errors by checking to see if the errors array is greater than 0. If the errors array is greater than 0, then we're going to set our flash message of danger to errors. We're going to set our form data equal to the post, so we'll send them back all the information they sent us. Then we'll relocate. Make sure you write this correctly. We're using concatenation here. That's what this dot base path is doing. The dot stands for concatenation. Base path is the constant we defined underneath our config file. Dot / users / new.php. So we'll send them back to the form, and then we'll exit. Now you can just copy that from further up on the script. I find typing things out repeatedly helps you try to remember them though. Now, interestingly enough, we're going to wind up writing that statement so many times that we'll probably turn it into a function. And then we'll use it as a function. Anytime you're duplicating logic, it's a good idea to turn it into a function. But we'll do that maybe next week. I'll have to look at my notes. So, good news, error handling, all done. We've done our validation, we've done our sanitization, we're not doing normalization. We've done all of the error issues, so if there's any errors whatsoever, we're telling the user what the errors are. We are finally ready for the final step, which is to create the user and insert them into the database. Yay us, right? So, I want to scroll down, but I feel like people are still typing. Is anybody still typing this out? Okay, I'll give you a couple more seconds. I'll just stare at you awkwardly till you're done. I don't think we'll get to log in, log out today. Well, actually, we might. We just might have to write it super fast. It's a really short script anyways. Log out's really super short. It's only six lines. Those of you, okay, so those of you that are waiting, you can actually start writing that SQL statement, because the SQL statement we're going to write is inserting the user into the database, and you probably already know how to write this because you've done that SQL statement in Andrew's class or in Ben's class. I would hope they've gotten to insert statements. So create quote characters, right? And in here, we're going to type in insert into users. Inside these quote characters, we're going to do first underscore name, last underscore name, email, password, and avatar. We're going to give it the values of all of those, but with colons in front of them. So I'm just going to literally copy them and paste them. And then I'm going to click and create a cursor in front of each one of these, like so, and add the colon. So what that's going to do is add our first name, last name, email, password, and avatar. Now you'll notice I'm not adding password confirmation because I was only using that to verify that the user had typed the password out correctly, right? It's not actually something that exists in our database. There's 3 fields that you don't see here because they're created automatically for you. Field 1 is role, right? So any new users that we create will automatically be created with the role of general, right? We're administrators, they'll be created as general users. We'll need at least one administrator in order to be able to facilitate managing users. That we'll have to create by going into the database and changing the role manually. The usual way around that in the industry, because obviously that's kind of a janky way to do things, the usual way around that is to create something called a seeder, where you actually seed data into the database using environment variables and stuff to keep everything nice and secure. Avatar will generate on this end. We'll use a link to generate the avatar. And then created at and updated at automatically happen in the database. The second we create a new user, it automatically does the create date and the update date. And anytime we update the user after that point, the update date will be modified automatically. So we don't need to concern ourselves with those. They're going to happen automatically. All right, so we've got our SQL statement. Now I'm going to create the two variables we need to pass in. We need the avatar. Actually, I think I've already got the avatar. I think I wrote it somewhere. I think it's just down a little further. Yep, there it is. There we go. So this avatar link, this is just an API that's automatically public. You don't need any authentication for it. You can actually click on that link. Like you can navigate there and just give it some random string at the end and it will create a new little derpy image for you. So we're using that to just basically publish an image into the database. That being said, we don't generally store images as JPEGs, as binary into the database. You can, it's called blob. You choose the blob data type, and then you can store actual like raw binary into there. Some people will store base64, which is just encoded binary. But usually what you would do is store the image in like S3, Dropbox, Google Drive, something like that. And then you would just link to it. And that's it. That's the smarter way to do it. This next one is a little different. This is our password. Now, we don't want to be target, and we don't want to store passwords as raw text in our database so that hackers now have a huge database of raw text passwords and emails. That's bad. What we want to do instead is we want to take that password and we want to encrypt it using one-way encryption or unidirectional encryption, which basically means that once it's encrypted, it can't be decrypted. Or, I mean, anything can be decrypted, but it's almost virtually impossible. It's so difficult because they're 256-bit encryptions. You need a super powerful computer to go through all those encryptions. Not to mention they're auto-salted by using the epoch timestamp and a whole bunch of other pieces. Like, it's not worth your time. It's easier to go find a dictionary list of vulnerable emails and passwords that you already know than to trying to decrypt these. They're not worth your time. So it makes sense that we encrypt them to make it more difficult for people, right? So what we do is, this is already done. You don't need a computer science degree, which is awesome. You just type in password hash, give it the raw password, which is our post password field, and then tell it how you want to do the encryption. So we're just going to use the default option, which is MD5 anyways. Or maybe it's bcrypt. It might be bcrypt, actually. And those are just algorithms. They're algorithms to actually do the encryption. So what's interesting, if you create a user, definitely try this. Create a user and give them the password of like test, right? Then create a second user and give them the same password of test. Then go into the database under phpMyAdmin and go look at those two passwords because you'll see the encrypted values and they will be different. And that's due to the time that the salt stamp got put in and when it got salted. So those passwords will not be the same, which obviously definitely increases the difficulty of trying to decrypt them. Yeah. The way we'll decrypt them is using password verify, but it actually doesn't decrypt. What it does is you give it a raw password, it encrypts it, and then compares it to see whether or not they match. So there's never a decrypt step. Cool. So we've got our avatar and our password. Now we're ready to bind all our parameters and prepare. I'm going to just wipe all those out because that's super annoying. So I'm going to take my statement variable, make it equal to con, prepare, and provide it MySQL. Then I'm going to start binding my parameters, and I have 5 parameters that I need to bind. So we will definitely be doing some copy and paste here because that's super obnoxious. So I'm going to go bind param. I'm going to give it the parameter name, so colon first name for the first parameter, $_ post first name, and then the data type I want it to be. And they're all going to be strings, so that's the good news. And then because they're basically going to be the same, I'm going to press Alt Shift and down to create 5 of them. And then I'm going to go replace the data. So I'm going to type in this one, hit Control D so it selects the other one, and type in last name. And then do Control D and type in email. This one is going to be different because this is avatar. So I need to give it the variable avatar. So I get rid of this post one and just change it out to avatar. Avatar. Why can't I spell? And then this last one is password. And changes it to password. And there we go. Super fast. Is anybody still writing password equals password hash? Awesome. I'm going to scroll down so that those bind parameters are at the top. And then I'm just going to write the last 3 lines of code that we need, just for those of you that are at that point. This is where we're going to create the session flash message for the success this time, so not an error. So we're going to push into an array and say, you registered successfully. Do my header again, but this time I'm not going to point off to the user form, obviously. Whoops. Dot. Base path. Dot. Instead, I have it written in the notes to take them to the index page, but that's kind of goofy. It's like, cool, you're registered. So now instead of taking you somewhere that's nicely authenticated, I'm just going to jam you right back to the home page. Instead, what we'll do is we'll send them to their profile page, which makes more sense. So I'm going to go to users show.php and set up my get parameter. $. I need to fetch the user though. No, that's why I didn't do that, because they're not logged in. Right. We're going to send them to the login page. That makes more sense. Sorry. Forgot which page we're on. Exit. There. That's it. That's the create.php page. Yeah, we sure as hell do. Yes, we definitely didn't execute. Nice catch. Statement. Execute. That's super important. Otherwise, nothing happens. So this will allow us to create a user, and you can create as many users as you want, obviously. Feel free to flood your database with users. Every user you create will have to have a unique email address because it's the only way you can create them, right? And every unique email address will obviously generate a new avatar image. So your images for each one of these people will be different. I was thinking for my next semester, I'm going to create a small application where when people come in, they go to a page and they click here, right? And it tells me how many people are in the class. And then when we're doing these code things, when they're done, they can go to the page and click done. And basically, as long as I have 31 people in the class and 31 people click done, then I know I can move on. Make it much easier for me to be able to tell what's happening. And one thing I'll suggest too is that I have a student in my Monday class, and she's using brackets, which seems to be like the worst IDE I've ever seen in my life. There's no code hinting. It doesn't, so like when you type out $_session, it doesn't pop up a block and tell you, hit enter to fill this out. There's nothing. There's no code hinting. And she's one of these type of typers, right? So when I type out 3 lines of code, it's like 5-6 minutes for her to actually type out those lines of code. So obviously I made it priority 1. Let's install VS Code and make your life a little easier. So if you're using brackets and you find, because I don't expect you to know how to type, that's totally fine. I don't even know if they really teach that in high school anymore. Do they teach you guys how to type in high school anymore? No, it's still finger poking. See, that's so weird. I can type super fast, but whatever. Anyways, if you find that you're finger poking and you're using something like brackets that's not giving you code hinting, download VS Code, make your life so much easier, because look what happens when I type $_session. See, I get this list, and then all I do is I've given myself muscle memory to automatically do that, so I don't have to type it out. So when I was typing out all these bind parameters, it took me not even 25 seconds or so to type them out. That's why, because I've learned to use my IDE and I'm using code hinting. Like, I take full advantage of it. I mean, there's purists out there that'll make fun of you, but fuck those guys. Like, this, I want to write code fast. I don't want to take hours and hours to write code, right? All right. Anybody still typing? Don't be shy. I won't make fun of you. All right. Okay. Going to jump over to the browser, and we're going to attempt to register a user. So now, obviously, if I don't fill this form out right and I hit submit, it's just going to bounce back with errors. But you should see your values still in the form. Your password doesn't have to be complex unless we want to make it complex. So I'm going to just use ASDF. That's my first 4 fingers on my keys, starting from where the nubby is on your key, right? I just go ASDF, hit submit. This user already exists. That's because I teach 2 other classes, so obviously this user's still around. So I'll add in my middle initial. There we go. ASDF. That's like the perfect meth face. Just like, meh. All right, submit. Not found. What? Of course not found, because it's going to login.php and we don't have a login.php page. That's actually the wrong address. But it did create the user. Let's go fix that. So it's not users login, it's sessions login. Sorry, totally different resource. Sessions login is where it should point to. All right. Just out of curiosity, how many people were able to create a user? That's not a good sign. All right. Once you've changed that line so it says sessions login and not users login, okay? Because maybe the reason why you think you haven't created a user is you did create a user, but you got bounced to a weird page that didn't give you a message. So sessions login.php is what we want there. Once you have that, jump back to the browser. Go ahead and just try to create another person. And it should take you to this page and say you registered successfully. That's what you're looking for. So here's the news. If you have this page, feel free to go. If you don't, open up Slack. Oh, why did they change this? Maybe it's for the better, though. Maybe they changed it so that now it doesn't do that weird new line character like it was doing before. So this will be users create.php. Let's snip it. So open up this. Feel free to copy the code inside and then paste it in your create script. Now, this is super important to note. See how there's a blank space here? What I have had is students that wind up with these blank spaces after they've copy and pasted out of here, those blank spaces seem to turn into, they're a weird character. It's invisible in your IDE, but they show up like this, but you can't see them. What they are is they're a Windows return character, and it causes PHP to completely blow up. So what you have to do is each of the spaces, like each of these enters, everywhere there's a new line, you backspace it out and then recreate it, and that fixes it. Or instead of copying and pasting, click the download button. That might also work better if you did the download button instead. What do you want, Fairy? Be quiet. Go away. There. All right, so next week we'll do the login. It'll take the first hour of class. Actually, it won't even take about the hour. It'll probably take about 35 minutes in total to do the login. And then we'll be ready to actually start doing the edit and update. We should be able to get edit done and update done before the end of class, I'm thinking. And then the following week we'll do destroy, and we'll create our first parent-child resource. And then that's it. Every class after that is kind of a filler class. So those classes will likely contain the image uploader. We'll build an image uploader. We'll do filter, sort, and search. We'll do whatever we need to fill those classes. Just other cool things. But that'll be the last like couple of weeks, if that. It depends. Like we might not make it there. But all right. Hi. All right, I'm going to set up right here, and then everybody can just come. If I don't tip myself. There we go. Much faster. Undefined variable con on line 92. That's likely due to how you defined con. So you define con as the connection script. That's cool. So in your create.php, so your buddies used ifs. You used a connect. Because you did it slightly different, you need this line. Good? No, it's working.
Thank you.
Yeah. Uses index. Call to a member function of preparer in index. Why are you in index? You typed all your code in the index page.
No, I typed the code create.php.
Okay, what is the error actually? Yeah. What's wrong with that? Oh. No, that's correct. Oh. The reason why. You're missing your connection. So how did you create your connection though? Did you do the IFI? You did the IFI though. What am I not seeing here? That's fine. Call to a member function preparer on null. Oh, that means oh, okay. So that means your connection, this value, has no value in it. For some reason, it's completely empty. So, right, because you didn't return. Now you have a value. Oh, why do I want to hit FM? That's a weird character to hit. Yay! Wowzers, you're amazeballs. That's awesome. Oh, I wrote that, didn't I? See, I have a very short memory. All right, so one thing I am noticing is you're not getting the coloration. So likely there's an issue with your Flash script. So take a look at my code online and try to duplicate what I did. You first, yeah. If you hit submit, you should get a whole bunch of errors, which you are getting errors. Call to undefined function. I'm guessing you have this connection script in, but I have a funny feeling. Yeah, you wrote the IFI. So because you wrote the IFI, you don't need that. because what's happening is the IFI is automatically executing all that functional code and then assigning it to a variable called $con. So you already have $con. So now if we do that, enter. Okay, so we didn't get the errors though. What happens when we fill it out? Create the user, or it's saying it did. And there's Harry. So your code is executing correctly. It's creating the character for you. What the problem is, I think, is your error messages, for some reason, are not getting to the session variable. I'm guessing. Yeah, you're missing your whole flash. That's why. So you need this flash code, and then in the header, yeah, you need to fill out these steps. So all of this is online under my lesson notes. Yeah, and then you're fine. Otherwise, you're perfect. Yeah. Unexpected if. Yeah. Unexpected semicolon now. Or thing in create line 128. Control G 128. Okay. You're missing your close and close characters. That's why. Is it? Alt? Yeah. Control Alt. No. Why is it doing that? Where's your end key? Like to get to the end. Oh, it's function. That is so weird. That's function. You're good. Make sure you can submit a character or a person. Yeah.
There's a weird for each error, unexpected for each on line 25. I've just had a look on it.
I think it might be the way you've written your brackets. PHP is pretty freaking strict. No, usually, sorry, let me see what this is. Unexpected for each on line 25 means that I hit for each, but you forgot to do something above me. So I shouldn't have hit for each yet. So your code looks all closed. Did you copy from Slack?
Yeah.
That's why. So remember that new line character thing I was telling you about? Everywhere in here right now is some bizarre new line character that's causing issues where there shouldn't be issues. See how I'm like hitting backspace twice, weirdly? Like, so here, right? Backspace, backspace, that one was fine. Some of them are not going to be fine. I think it's, yeah, see? There's some backspace there. It's like, what character is that? It's just some random character that's created by Slack. So go through and do that same step. Backspace, backspace, enter. Control S. You might still have some errors. Yeah, you've got other errors, probably caused by the same thing. So just go through and replace all of the enter lines with your own enter line. Yeah. Call GeoMember function, prepare on null, on index on line 16. Yeah, one of your friends had the same issue. Yep, it is there. So the issue we were having was that in the connect script, okay, so you have this. So you did return con.
I just, he tells me.
Oh, you just did it?
Yeah, I just did it, but
So it should work.
it didn't go.
Did not go. Yep, it definitely did not go. Because you don't. Yeah, you have the file. Unless this is not the file. So the difference is if we do a require, we can actually know for sure. Okay, so it's definitely there. So includes underscore connect goes on con. Oh, that's why. See, this is a try catch. What try does is it says try this code, and if it fails, then catch it. So yeah, you're just one too high. That's all. Okay, so now you have on line 4 an unexpected if statement. So wait, what friggin' thing is that? Oh, header. No, in header. In header. In here. On line 4. What? Unexpected if on line 4. What's wrong with that if? You have an opening PHP tag. This is the same copy code thing issue. So when you copy the code from the stupid Slack, it creates these weird little new line characters, and that's what causes these really bizarre issues. I don't know why it does that. It's so dumb. It's really annoying. See how everything's kind of like working again? And it's all because of that. Which makes it super difficult to troubleshoot because, yeah, this one too. Same thing. Yeah, everything's fine. It's just that. Yeah. Okay, so register. Unexpected as on line 74 for the create. Only because you see how you put the square bracket here? So what that square bracket is actually doing is it's a symbol to say that this is an array. And then we're saying take that array as a field. So what happens is for each value, make it the field, and then pass it into the block. And then it will move to last name and do the same thing. It'll take last name, assign it to field, and pass it to the block. That's what it's doing. So the first argument always has to be an array, and this syntax you see here, that's what that is. It's an array. But instead of creating it as a variable outside, we're just passing it in as an array, just written out raw. So you're close there, but line 134, unexpected question mark. Oh yeah. So what you did was you forgot to hold down your shift key. Shift. Oh no, sorry, you hit the wrong character. Shift and then the arrow. There you go. And we're redirecting to the wrong place. Instead of users/new.php, you're going to users.new.php. So that is up further in one of our errors. Not that one. This one. So unfortunately, we got to go back and refresh this. That's good. That's a good sign. Isn't it? Cool. We're good. Let's fill out some information. Whoops. Perfect. You're good.
Thank you.
No worries. My pleasure. Yeah. So if we look, under the console, yeah, so what this means is we're missing the header file is what's happening here. There's the header. There's the config. What the hell? It's empty. Why would it be empty? Are we in the correct directory? Lesson 4. Users. You have partials header. Oh, you're missing all of the header information. Yeah, so you're missing the rest of the header. So because we build these in pieces, right? That's the reason why you're missing it. So you need to find the code that's above all that. You said you just did this, right? Okay. So that should be there. Flash data, yep. We also have one called $sign form data underscore session form underscore data or null. And then this thing we can just Alt Shift down, Control Shift D. Okay. There we go. So you've started your session, you've got your flash pieces, and then you've done this. You've included your flash down here. That's all correct now. Cool. Errors are better than nothing. So line 4, we have an unexpected if. And that's likely caused by stupid Slack. I think what's causing it is I'm using Parallels on my Mac, and I think it's creating an issue with it. Line 5, and this is the same silly issue. Yeah, it's adding some weird character there that I cannot detect. I can't figure out what the heck the character is, but it keeps adding it in. There's a way to turn on the view so you can actually see what's happening in the editor. Oh, we already did this. We already know where. Yeah, it should show there. So if I hit submit, sure enough. There you go, Harry. Oh,
Getting online saying unexpected semicolon.
Yep.
Just like did all those steps.
You're missing a, no, you're not. If on line 94, you're missing a semicolon. No, you're not. Sorry, go back to your error message for a second. Include PHP. No, it's an unexpected semicolon, not that you're missing one, that you've got one. It doesn't know why it's there. So go back.
I removed the indenting.
Parentheses. Session flash danger equals errors. Can I see for a second? So we are missing our exit. We definitely need to need the exit so we don't forget. That's not the issue. But just in case, that's the issue. Count errors greater than 0. Check if the user exists to call an error if it does. Are we looking at a different page and we're editing?
No, we are
That's correct, that's correct, that's correct, that's correct. I mean, unless errors has been set wrong somehow. It's definitely a problem with this if statement. And I can't see what the issue is.
Maybe like over here.
I'm just going to rewrite it.
Skip the shorthand.
I have no idea. It doesn't look any different. Like it's the same statement, and yet it was something was odd in it. And this is no different either. It's the same damn statement. Oh, but you have it on a new line. That is going to create an issue. Unexpected sequel.
Did that somehow.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me. What is the beef here? Like, what the fuck?
What if it type this line over again, like we are missing the column?
No, there's no colons for that part. Avatar. First name, last name, email, password, avatar. That should be it. My statement's a bit shorter than yours. It is definitely code above it. If count errors greater than 0. So it's whatever happened above it. There we go. Can't get any closer to the fucking if condition. What the hell? Alright. I'm done. Open the damn containing folder.
That's over there.
I don't know what it was. There had to be other characters in there that were just screwing the whole thing up, but it was like PHP was just dying.
Flash.php.
On line 11, invalid argument is applied. Invalid argument. Oh, I had this issue. Somebody had done something weird in the header. So what was happening is they were checking is set instead of assigning it properly. So that's correct. Careful about doing stuff like this because it can actually cause it to have syntax errors. Okay, so that's all correct. Control-P slash. If empty, if the flash data as. Okay, so. You have danger with nothing inside of it except for a null value, which means that we're likely not defining that variable in time. So you're not, whatever you're storing into danger, unfortunately, is not an array. Which means it's likely under create that is the issue. Okay, let's go to the top. Errors, not error. Errors. That's why, because you've called it error everywhere. Errors. It wouldn't matter as long as you were passing errors to sessions, but I think you're passing error. Sorry, I think you're passing errors. You're storing into error, but you're passing errors to session, which is not what you created. So errors doesn't have any value in it, but errors did. I can't say that less confusing. I'm trying to figure out a way to say that less confusing. You defined a variable called error as an array, and you're putting values into it. But what you gave back to sessions was errors. Yeah. There. That's better. That's what I'm trying to say. My brain is a little bit on the confusing side today. I've been up since like 5:36 almost, yeah. All the rest of that looks fine. So Control S, Alt Tab, Control R. Submit. Cool. That is a good sign. ASDF tab, ASDF tab, ASDF at ASDF dot ASDF tab, ASDF, ASDF. Submit. Password and password confirmation do need to match. Yes, they do need to match. Two things are not like the other. One of these things is not the same. Password equals password does not equal confirmation. Okay, so let's make triple double sure that the form for the password I mean, these lines are kind of junky, but it looks like it's right. Confirmation. Like, it is possible I didn't type it in right. Also, your information isn't coming back. Okay, so that's correct. God, you can tell you guys are Java programmers. This dropped curly brace instead of doing the inline curly brace like I do. That is very much people from compiled languages. I am very confused how these two things don't match. Did you copy and paste that somewhere else too? Ah, he did. Then it would make sense if there was an error there, but it's not. There's not even an error there. Like, there's nothing wrong with that statement. He's asking, does $password match $password confirmation? That's not the problem. There's something else causing the issue. What?
Yeah, there's an underscore.
Oh, nice catch. There it is. Haha. Talk about where's Waldo. Wow, that was hard to find. ASDF. ASDF. Okay, that's better at least. I mean, that's not very friendly, but undefined first underscore name. See these spaces? See that space you have between those two? You gotta keep an eye on those spaces. It's right there. Bam. That space is a bad space. Get rid of that bad space. Okay. That looks right. Yep. Binding the parameter, that is correct. This user already exists. Yep. Iterating over the error. What is with this? Errors. Please tell me it's not like everywhere. Errors, errors. And you called it errors, so just one place. All right, where's your SQL statement? Wait, where's your SQL statement?
Here.
Oh, there it is. Email, password, first name, last name, email, password, and avatar. Yep, that's correct. All that is correct. And all that's correct. Cool. Alt-Tab, Control-R, continue. User already exists. That's because we keep trying to create the same user. Do you know it? Yep. The picture always makes me laugh, and I don't know why. Awesome. It created. We just got sent to a weird location. Because you did paste.path instead of underscore. That was the only problem. So let's just verify that. That's case. More ASDFs. ASDF. ASDF. Don't worry, I'm going to show you next week how to delete those people. There you go. Yeah, it's working. You're welcome. Yeah, it's not going to work yet. We haven't built that yet. Yeah, that's next week. Yeah.
We just haven't doubt, like, I'm not sure, like, what bind param is supposed to do.
Bind param does?
So what bind param is actually, so a good place to look